Hi everyone, my name is Steven, founder of the Terraster project, and this is our Blockchain 101 series. And today we're going to talk about this idea that blockchain systems is really a garbage in, garbage out system. Okay, so what does that mean? I mean, like most information storage systems, the system itself can't really tell whether or not the information being fed into it is actually true. We had another Blockchain 101 series in which we talked about how the blockchain system is not able to enforce veracity of information for off-chain generated data, right? And the vast majority of data in the world are generated off the blockchain, not on the blockchain. So how do you solve this problem of, garbage in, garbage out? It's very easy to actually lie, quote unquote, to the blockchain because it just can't tell whether or not what you're telling it is true. It has no mechanism to enforce it, and in most cases, it doesn't really even care whether or not that information is true. So, what does that mean for something to be really true, right? So, first of all, is it coming from an identity, right, that can actually be well identified? Is it coming from where it says it's coming from, right? So, how do you make sure that it's coming from the right source? Second, processing and transmission. Are you actually getting this information from the source, directly from the source, and it's not tampered with when it's being processed and transmitted, right? So that's very, very key. Third, there's this idea of digital analog interface, right? Even if you're getting the data from the source, is someone tampering the data collection process, right? So let's go through these one by one and let's talk about these three problems or these three things that we need to solve in the context of our two applications. We have Marinate, which tracks everyday agreements between people. So this is dealing with people generated data that mostly occurs on baseline communication applications such as email, texting, chat applications, stuff like that. These are informal agreements reached between people to coordinate work. And we also have Helio. Helio is a platform that secures machine state integrity. What it does is that it adds trust to machine generated data, right? So that you can actually know that the data was generated from specific devices and that it wasn't really tampered with after it was collected. Okay, so identity. How do you solve the identity problem, say, for Marinate? Okay, well, for Marinate, identity is people, right? So it uses a very simple way to actually associate identity with cryptographic keys. So all the agreements that stakeholders sign to these informal agreements, things like, hey, you owe me $5, or the window on the second floor needs to be 1 centimeter to the right. All these type of coordinating informal agreements, they're signed by the relevant stakeholders, right? And they're signed with digital signatures. But then, how do you associate those signatures with people, right? Well, when they actually start using Marinate, they typically use it through a baseline communication application. So that's how most websites today actually tell people by their identities. They identify them through their email address, through their social media account, through their WhatsApp account, whatever. We do the same thing. So we associate a key pair with access to a specific baseline communication tool, right? So this is sort of like account, digital account plus keys, right? So that's how we do it for people. Well, how do you do it for devices, right? So devices are a little bit trickier because you need to make sure that whatever keys, well, devices don't own like social media accounts, hopefully not, but they need to have keys that are not tampered with and keys that no one else can know about and keys that cannot be read out from the device. So in order to protect it, you use something called a secure element, right? So these secure element are these very simple chips that are built into a lot of our everyday devices. Most commonly, you can find them on your credit cards. They are there to generate secrets, and they're there to sign things and encrypt things. And they're designed to resist attempts to read out from these chips out the secret that's actually embedded inside these keys. And so that is how you actually secure identity, right, for both Marinade and Helio. Okay, how do you secure the processing and transmission part? Well, for processing and transmission for Marinade, you collect the data at the source. For example, if three people are messaging each other, hey, we all agree that the window needs to be moved 1 centimeter to the left, right? Well, after all these three people agree to it, they click on a button that cryptographically signs that agreement. So what we're essentially doing is that we're using humans, right? So the human stakeholders are literally reading what they're signing, and they're signing it, right? So this is really human signing, right? So they are seeing very clearly exactly what it is that they're signing, and it can actually be very easily verified that the hashes that are being recorded into a blockchain is directly reproducible from the raw informal agreement that they're actually signing, right? So this is very easily verified that the data and that the agreement that they're signing was not tampered with, and it's exactly what they expect themselves to be signing. So this is very easy, verifiable, and traceable, and that's how you ensure that things were not messed with during processing and transmission. For devices, it's once again a little bit more complicated because devices aren't nearly as smart as humans. So we use something called a write once microcontroller unit, right? So what that basically means is that all the logic that's actually on this device that's collecting the data, right, has application logic that are completely tamper-proof. Once the application logic has been encoded into this microcontroller, it cannot be altered. Now, this has the upside of being tamper-proof. Of course, the downside is that this device can't be upgraded, right? So, if you have firmware or software updates later on, you can't upgrade. It just doesn't allow anything to be written twice, right? So that's how we ensure that processing and transmission has a guaranteed, predictable behavior, and that no one can go into this device and actually alter the data during processing and transmission. Right. So it has write once a microcontroller unit that fixes all the application logic. Okay. Digital analog interface. Well, this problem is actually pretty much a known problem for Marinade, because in Marinade, you're collecting information from a diverse group of people, multiple stakeholders, and typically they're using either a phone or a computer. So in order to really mess with the digital analog interface, you have to hack multiple devices for all these stakeholders, and all of them are remotely located. And typically speaking, the value of these informal agreements tend to be low, because remember, if the agreement has an extremely high value, they would have signed a legal contract about it already, right? So it's typically a relatively low value, fast moving type of agreement. So the risk here is very, very, very low risk, um, that somebody would, for a specific agreement, try to hack devices, for different stakeholders, right? So it's very, very high amount of effort for very little value. So it's very low risk. For the digital analog interface in terms of Helio, once again, we're relying on this idea that the risk is actually relatively low because we made it so hard for someone to really tamper with this device, right? So the way that they could actually tamper with the digital analog interface for the Helio platform is that they have to go into these hardware machines and assets that are producing this data and physically pry off the secure endpoints that have been integrated into it. And it's very easy to actually discover someone doing that, right? Imagine some hacker or somebody who's a malicious player going to all these assets and prying them open, with their hands, and physically like just cutting things off, or altering the wiring and everything like that. It would be very easy to actually discover someone who is actually tampering with all that equipment. And also, when you have application specific scenarios, you can actually have ways to actually tamper proof it. For example, we can also add a tamper proof seal, on these hardware modules and their connections with the external signals, so that if they are actually tampered with, it's very easily seen that the seal has been broken. right? So there are lots of ways. You can use CLs. You can just actually rely on the fact that it's very expensive and very easily discoverable if you actually do try to tamper with it, right? So easily discoverable. Okay, so this is how we think about this idea of garbage in, garbage out. And all of our application platforms were specifically designed with these problems in mind, and we have specific solutions, and we evaluate the risk of all of these problems, and they were designed directly into our application platforms. Thank you very much.